Tom lived on the edge of a quiet town where open fields stretched far into the distance. His ranch was not the largest in the area, but it was filled with charm. Wide orchards lined one side with rows of apple and peach trees. A small stream cut across the back field where deer often came to drink. Tom cared for the land with steady patience. He planted, watered, repaired fences, and fixed tools every day. The ranch gave him peace. He had left behind years of city work, noise, and traffic to find this life of calm. The entrance to his land was marked by a simple wooden gate. It was not tall or grand, but it meant much to Tom. He had built it himself with sturdy posts and a brass latch. The latch gave a satisfying click when closed. The gate served two purposes. It kept wandering animals from running into his orchard, and it gave Tom a sense of boundary. When the gate was shut, he knew he was home and safe. He liked the idea that people respected the line between the road and his land. Most neighbors understood this. They slowed their cars when they reached the gate, honked once if Tom was nearby, and waved to him with friendly smiles. Sometimes they even stopped to chat about crops or weather. Tom liked those moments. They made him feel part of a community, yet still able to enjoy his private space. But not everyone respected the gate. There was one neighbor in particular who seemed to ignore it completely. Her name was Karen. She lived in the tidy development managed by the local homeowners association just down the road. Karen liked order, rules, and schedules, but she seemed to believe that her own needs mattered more than others. She often carried a clipboard and wore polished shoes as if she were always in charge of something. Karen had decided that Tom's gate was in her way. Instead of driving on the main road that looped around the development and led to her house, she preferred to cut straight through Tom's property. It saved her only a few minutes, but she acted as if those minutes were precious. Without asking permission, she began to drive through Tom's gate whenever she pleased. At first, Tom thought it was a mistake. Maybe she was lost or confused. But soon it became clear that this was her habit. The first time, Tom greeted her politely. He offered her coffee as she slowed her car near the orchard. She accepted the cup without a smile, muttered a quick word, and drove right through the gate, leaving the latch hanging loosely. Tom noticed the bent metal but fixed it without complaint. He told himself it was only once. But then it happened again, and again. Each time Karen passed, the grass near the gate grew more flattened. Tire marks lined the soil. Mud splashed against the posts during rainy days. Once, Tom's calf had been frightened by her speeding car and nearly injured itself against the fence. Tom grew uneasy. The gate no longer felt like a boundary. It felt like a door left open by someone who had no right to enter. Tom tried to address it calmly. He spoke to Karen when he met her on the road. He said kindly, "This gate keeps my animals safe. Please use the main road." Karen only shrugged and replied that she had many errands and little time to waste. She said rules of convenience mattered more than small fences. Tom explained that it was not only about convenience. It was about respect. Karen dismissed him with a wave of her hand. "Don't make a scene over such a small thing," she said before driving away. Her words stung. Tom had worked hard for the ranch. Every fence, every plant, every tool carried his effort. For someone to dismiss that effort as a small thing felt deeply unfair. Still, Tom held back his anger. He believed anger never solved anything. Instead, he chose patience. He fixed the latch once more, painted the gate a bright blue so it was easy to see, and hoped that would be enough. But the pattern continued. Karen kept driving through. Sometimes she did not even slow down. She treated the path like her personal shortcut. One afternoon, Tom found a crumpled receipt near the gate from a shop in town. It must have fallen from Karen's car window. On another day, he discovered deep ruts where her tires had spun in the mud. The damage grew worse with time. Tom began keeping a notebook. He wrote down dates, times, and what he observed. On one page, he drew the tracks left by her car. On another page, he recorded the cost of repairs. He was not sure what he would do with this record, but writing helped him stay calm. It reminded him that the problem was real and not just his imagination. At night, Tom would sit on his porch with a lantern and watch the road. The headlights of passing cars flickered in the distance. Each time he saw Karen's car heading toward his gate, he felt a tightness in his chest. He wondered whether he should close the gate with a stronger lock. But then he feared she might break it out of impatience. He considered blocking the path with heavy stones, but he did not want to create danger for her car or anyone else. What Tom wanted was respect, not conflict. He wanted Karen to understand that the gate was not hers to use as she pleased. He wanted the HOA, which often spoke about rules and fairness, to stand by him. But when he mentioned the issue at a neighborhood gathering, some members smiled politely and said it was between neighbors. The HOA president, Helen, promised to look into it, but weeks passed without change. Tom realized that waiting would not solve anything. Karen would not stop on her own. The HOA would not act unless the problem became clear to everyone. He would need to take matters into his own hands, but in a way that remained fair and calm. He could not risk anger or violence. He had to plan something clever, something that showed the truth without harm. He thought of traps, but not the kind that snap shut. His trap would be made of patience, honesty, and evidence. He imagined a way to let the whole community see what was happening, so that Karen could not deny it. He did not want to humiliate her, but he wanted her to feel the weight of her choices. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, Tom stood by the blue gate and made a quiet promise to himself. He would not let his ranch be treated as a shortcut any longer. He would set a plan into motion, one that Karen would never forget. It would not hurt her, but it would teach her that respect is stronger than shortcuts. Tom returned to his porch, opened his notebook, and began to write ideas. He wrote slowly, carefully, each word marking the start of a new chapter in his life on the ranch. The gate stood behind him, steady against the twilight, waiting for the day it would no longer be ignored. The morning sun rose over Tom's ranch, painting the orchard in golden light. Birds sang in the branches, and the gentle sound of the stream reached the farmhouse porch. Tom enjoyed mornings like this. He walked to the gate with a cup of tea in his hand and checked the latch. As always, he hoped it would still be closed and straight. But when he reached it, he sighed. The latch was bent again. The gate pushed halfway open, and muddy tracks ran straight through the grass. Karen had passed during the night or early morning. Tom bent down to study the tracks. He could tell from the shape of the tires that it was the same car. The grass was torn and the soil was pressed down hard. He shook his head slowly. His notebook already had too many entries like this. He pulled a pen from his pocket and wrote the date and time. He made a small sketch of the tracks and noted the broken latch again. He repaired the gate, hammered the post gently into place, and painted over a scratch in the wood. But inside, his patience was wearing thin. He had been quiet for weeks, recording carefully, speaking politely, but nothing had changed. Karen continued to treat his land as if it were her shortcut road. That afternoon, Tom drove into town for supplies. At the general store, he met Ben, an older man who had lived nearby for many years. Ben was loading bags of feed into his truck when he saw Tom. "You look tired, Tom," Ben said with concern. "What's on your mind?" Tom hesitated, but then explained the problem. He told Ben about Karen driving through his gate, the bent latch, the frightened calf, and the growing damage to the land. Ben listened quietly, nodding. "I'm not surprised," Ben said after a moment. "Karen has always believed rules bend for her. Years ago, she tried to change the HOA's gardening rules so she could plant whatever she wanted in front of her house. When the board said no, she did it anyway until neighbors complained. She doesn't like being told no." Tom felt a bit lighter after sharing. He asked if Ben thought the HOA would help. Ben sighed. "The HOA likes to talk about fairness, but they often avoid conflict. If it doesn't affect everyone, they move slow. You'll need more than polite words to make them act." Tom thought about this as he drove back to the ranch. He knew Ben was right. The HOA meeting weeks ago had ended with no answers. Helen, the president, had promised to check records, but nothing came of it. If Tom wanted results, he needed a clear plan. That evening, Tom walked the fence line and thought about what to do. He knew he could not build a wall or set heavy stones in the road. That would cause anger and maybe even danger. He did not want to fight. He wanted fairness. So he asked himself, what would fairness look like? It would look like neighbors knowing the truth, the HOA seeing the proof, and Karen facing her actions without escape. With this thought, Tom decided to start collecting stronger evidence. His small notebook was not enough. He needed pictures, records, and voices of neighbors. That way, he would not stand alone when speaking at the next meeting. The next morning, he set up a small camera on a post near the gate. He angled it carefully so it captured the road, the gate, and the field behind it. The camera had a wide lens and a simple motion sensor. Whenever a car passed, it would record. Tom tested it by walking through the gate twice. He smiled when he saw the clear images on the small screen. 2 days later, the camera captured what Tom expected. At exactly 7:45 in the morning, Karen's car rolled through. She did not slow down, and the latch bent once again. Tom printed the image, placed it in a folder, and repaired the latch for the third time that week. Each day, Tom checked the camera. He soon had a collection of photographs, each showing the same car and the same act. He arranged them by date and added notes. He also printed a picture of the muddy tracks, the bent latch, and the frightened calf. Slowly, his folder grew thicker. Still, Tom knew pictures alone might not be enough. People sometimes doubted what they saw, or they made excuses. He needed support from neighbors who also noticed the problem. So, he began to ask quietly. One evening, he visited Nora and Amir, a young couple who lived near the orchard. Their children played by the fence as Tom explained his situation. Nora frowned and said, "We've seen Karen's car too. She often drives fast near here. My children get scared when they hear the engine." Amir nodded and added, "We never use the gate, Tom. It's your land. If you need us to say this at the meeting, we will." Tom thanked them warmly. Their words gave him strength. Later, he visited Ben again, who agreed to write a short note about respecting private property. Other neighbors were slower to respond, but a few signed small statements. Some simply said, "Tom's gate should be respected." Tom collected each one and placed them carefully in his folder. By now, he had pictures, notes, and neighbor voices. His evidence was becoming clear. But he wanted one more layer, something that showed kindness too, so no one could say he acted out of anger. He decided to place a sign near the gate. He built it from a smooth wooden board and painted it white. With steady brush strokes, he wrote in large blue letters, "Private gate. Please use main road. Thank you." He placed it on the side where cars could not miss it. To make it even kinder, he set a small box on the post with seed packets from his orchard. The box carried a note, "For neighbors who respect the gate, a gift of seeds." The gesture was small, but it mattered to Tom. It showed he was not closing himself away. He was inviting neighbors to share in kindness if they respected his boundary. The next morning, he checked the gate again. The sign stood firm, the seed packet still full. But by afternoon, the camera caught Karen's car again. She drove through without stopping, ignoring the sign completely. Tom printed the image and added it to his folder. The contrast was clear. The sign said respect, the seeds offered kindness, and the picture showed disregard. Tom's plan was taking shape. He would wait for the next HOA meeting. There, he would present everything: the pictures, the notes, the sign, and the kind gesture. He would not raise his voice or argue. He would let the truth speak for itself. He believed that once the community saw the pattern, they could not deny it. Still, waiting was not easy. Each day Karen passed, Tom felt the same tightness in his chest. He wanted to stop her at once, but he reminded himself of the bigger goal. If he acted too quickly, it might look like anger. If he waited, the evidence would grow stronger. At night, Tom sat at his desk under a warm lamp. He arranged his folder and wrote a short statement. He practiced reading it in a calm voice. He imagined standing in front of the board, laying out the facts and asking for respect. He reminded himself that fairness comes from patience and truth. The days stretched into weeks. Karen kept driving through. The folder grew heavier with photographs. The seed box became a symbol. Some neighbors took packets and planted them, but Karen never touched them. Her car simply roared past the sign in the box, leaving only more bent latches and torn grass. Tom looked at the growing evidence and felt both weary and hopeful. The problem was larger now, but so was his preparation. The orchard still bloomed, the stream still ran, and the gate still stood blue against the road. Soon the time would come when the truth could no longer be ignored. The days on Tom's ranch followed a calm rhythm, but under the calm lay a steady determination. Each morning he walked to the blue gate, checked the latch, and recorded what he saw. Each evening he returned to his folder, adding photographs, notes, and statements from neighbors. He had grown used to this routine, but inside he was preparing for something bigger. The next HOA meeting was approaching, and Tom knew it would be his chance to present the truth. One evening, as the sun sank low, Tom sat on his porch with his notebook. The folder of evidence rested on the table beside him. He flipped through the photographs again, studying the bent latch, the muddy tracks, and Karen's car caught in clear detail. The evidence was strong, But Tom wanted to strengthen his case even further. He wanted to show not only the problem but also his efforts to solve it kindly. He thought about how to bring more neighbors onto his side. Evidence alone was powerful, but voices carried weight in meetings. If neighbors spoke for him, the board would find it harder to ignore. Tom knew he was not a man of many words, but he trusted quiet persistence. He decided to reach out more openly. The next morning, Tom carried a small basket of apples from his orchard and walked to Nora and Amir's house. Their children ran across the yard, laughing as they played with a ball. Nora welcomed him warmly and offered him a seat. "I came to thank you," Tom said, placing the basket of apples on the table. "Your words gave me courage. I'm preparing for the HOA meeting, and I want to ask if you'd be willing to attend. If others hear your experience, it will help." Nora nodded without hesitation. "Of course we'll come. It's not right what she's doing. The children are afraid of cars near your gate. We want it to stop." Amir agreed, saying, "We'll stand by you, Tom. You've been patient long enough." Tom left their house feeling lighter. The support of a young family gave him strength. Later, he visited Ben again. The old man leaned on his walking stick but spoke with firmness. "I'll be at the meeting, Tom. I'll tell them what I know. Karen needs to learn that convenience is not above respect." Encouraged, Tom decided to invite more neighbors. He wrote short, polite notes explaining his plan and placed them in mailboxes. The notes invited neighbors to a simple gathering at his orchard before the HOA meeting. He promised tea, fruit, and a chance to share thoughts about the gate. He kept the language calm and kind so no one would feel pressured. On the day of the gathering, Tom set a long wooden table under the orchard trees. He placed jugs of fresh tea, plates of apples, and jars of honey on the table. A cool breeze rustled the leaves and sunlight filtered through the branches. Slowly, neighbors arrived. Some came out of curiosity, some out of support, and a few simply to enjoy the orchard. Nora and Amir arrived with their children. Ben came with steady steps. Even Helen, the HOA president, appeared, holding a folder of papers. Other families stood nearby, sipping tea and talking quietly. Tom welcomed each one with a calm smile. When the group had gathered, Tom stood by the table and spoke. His voice was steady, though not loud. "Thank you for coming. You all know my gate. Many of you have seen the sign and the seed packets. I want to explain why I asked you here. My gate has been used as a shortcut by someone who does not have permission. I have repaired the latch many times. I have taken photographs, kept notes, and spoken kindly, but the problem continues. I do not want conflict. I only want respect. At the next HOA meeting, I will present the evidence. If you are willing to share your experiences, it will help us reach a fair decision." There was a silence, and then Nora spoke. "We've seen it, Tom. We'll tell the truth. My children deserve to feel safe near the orchard." Amir nodded. Ben added his voice, "I'll support you. I've lived here long enough to know what fairness looks like." A few other neighbors agreed quietly. Some were cautious, but no one spoke against Tom. Helen listened with her hands folded, saying little, but Tom noticed she paid attention. He felt that the seeds of support were beginning to grow. Before the gathering ended, Tom brought out the guest book he had placed by the gate. It contained signatures of those who had used the main road instead of the shortcut. He passed it around the table. Many neighbors added their names and short notes of support. The guest book became another piece of evidence, showing that most people respected the gate. After everyone left, Tom walked back to the blue gate. He touched the wooden post, feeling its rough surface. He thought about how far things had come since the first day Karen drove through. The problem had grown, but so had his preparation. He no longer felt alone. In the following days, Tom refined his strategy. He arranged the folder with care, placing photographs in order, followed by notes, neighbor statements, and the guest book. He wrote a short speech, rehearsing it at his desk until the words felt natural. He kept his tone calm, avoiding anger. His goal was not to defeat Karen, but to show the truth clearly. The camera by the gate continued to record. It captured more images of Karen's car passing through without slowing down. Each image added strength to Tom's folder. Sometimes late at night, Tom looked through the photographs and felt a quiet satisfaction. The truth was being gathered piece by piece, like fruit ripening in the orchard. But Karen seemed unaware of the growing storm. She continued her shortcut as if nothing had changed. She ignored the sign, the seed packets, and even the guest book. Her actions only made Tom's evidence stronger. He did not confront her. He let the camera do the work. One afternoon, Helen stopped by the ranch. She walked slowly toward the gate, her folder in her hand. Tom greeted her politely. "I wanted to see the gate for myself," Helen said. She examined the sign, the latch, and the seed box. She flipped through a few of Tom's photographs. "You've kept a detailed record. That will matter at the meeting." Tom nodded. "I only want fairness. I don't wish to embarrass anyone, but I can't keep repairing the gate forever." Helen looked thoughtful. "The board will listen, Tom. Be ready to present calmly. Facts carry weight when they are shown with patience." Her words encouraged him. Tom thanked her and she left quietly. As the day of the HOA meeting drew near, Tom prepared carefully. He placed the folder in a leather case. He packed a small projector to show the camera footage. He stacked extra copies of his statement for the board members. He even polished his boots and ironed his shirt. He wanted to appear calm, steady, and respectful. The night before the meeting, Tom sat on his porch again. The orchard lay silent under the stars. The blue gate stood firm in the moonlight. Tom thought about the journey. What had begun as a simple problem with a latch had become a lesson in patience, strategy, and community. He had chosen not to fight with anger, but to prepare with honesty. Now the time had come to reveal the truth. He closed his notebook and whispered softly, "Tomorrow they will see." The ranch was quiet, but in Tom's heart, a steady strength had grown. He was ready to face the HOA, ready to share his folder, and ready to set the trap that Karen would never forget. The sun had just begun to rise above the hills when David stepped out of his ranch house. The air was fresh and the golden light touched the grass and trees, making everything look calm and peaceful. Yet inside his heart he knew the peace was temporary. For weeks Karen had tested his patience, ignoring the clear rules, driving through his ranch gate whenever she pleased, and even mocking him in front of neighbors. David had grown up on this land. The ranch had belonged to his father and grandfather before him. It was not just soil and fences to him. It was part of his life, part of his family's story. Every tree, every path, and even the old barn had meaning. That was why it stung him so deeply when Karen, a woman who had only recently moved into the community, treated his ranch like a shortcut for her own comfort. She acted as though rules did not apply to her. Whenever he confronted her, she gave the same arrogant smile and said, "It's just a little drive, nothing serious." But David knew better. It was about respect, about boundaries, about the way one person treats another. If Karen could not understand that, then she would have to learn in a different way. That morning, as he drank his coffee and looked over the fields, David made up his mind. He would set his plan into motion, not to hurt her, but to teach her that her actions had consequences. He started with small adjustments. He checked the hinges on his gate, made sure the wooden posts were strong, and reinforced the lock. Then he added a second chain, one that looked ordinary but was cleverly designed. To anyone driving through, it seemed like a normal gate, but the way it was tied meant that forcing it open would not end well for the car trying to push through. David worked with patience. He wanted everything to appear natural, almost invisible, so that Karen would not suspect anything. While he worked, he thought about his grandfather's lessons. The old man used to say, "A rancher must protect his land with wisdom, not anger. Anger burns quickly, but wisdom builds walls that last." That memory guided David as he prepared. He was not acting out of rage. He was acting with a steady mind. Later that day, he walked into town. He visited a hardware store and picked up supplies, extra chains, reflective signs, and a few tools. He greeted people warmly, as he always did, because he did not want to appear secretive. He had no desire to cause a scandal. He simply wanted to send a message to someone who refused to listen. Meanwhile, Karen was living her life as though nothing could touch her. She had told some of the neighbors that David was too serious and stuck in the past. She laughed about his ranch, calling it just some land with cows and fences. Many neighbors did not agree with her, but few were brave enough to confront her directly. They feared her sharp tongue and the way she complained about everything to the homeowners association. That evening, David sat on his porch with his old dog, Rusty, lying at his feet. The sky was painted with soft colors of orange and pink. He watched the horizon and thought about the coming days. He did not know exactly when Karen would try to cut through again, but he felt certain it would not take long. She was too set in her ways to stop now. The next morning, David made another careful adjustment. He placed a harmless but surprising addition on the inside of the gate, a layer of soft paint on a hidden board. If Karen tried to push through, her car would not be damaged badly, but she would end up with bright paint smeared across the front. It would be impossible for her to deny what she had done, as the evidence would be written on her own car. He smiled to himself when he finished. It was not destruction. It was a lesson. Days passed. Karen drove around the neighborhood as usual, but she avoided David's land for a short time. Perhaps she sensed something, or perhaps she was simply busy. David did not mind waiting. He had learned from the land itself that patience always paid off. Then one late afternoon he heard the sound he had been expecting. The roar of Karen's car, fast and careless, heading straight toward the gate. He stayed hidden by the barn, watching quietly. His heart beat harder, not out of fear but out of anticipation. Karen's car slowed only slightly as she reached the gate. She probably thought she could nudge it open, just as she had before. But the reinforced chain held firm. Her car pushed forward, and instead of swinging open, the gate resisted. The surprise on her face was clear even from a distance. The next moment was almost comical. The hidden paintboard made its mark, leaving a bright streak across the front of her shiny vehicle. Karen stopped her car abruptly, stepping out with a shocked expression. She stared at the gate, then at her car, and then around the ranch as if expecting someone to jump out and laugh at her. David stayed still. He did not need to reveal himself yet. He wanted her to feel the weight of what had just happened. After a few moments, Karen got back into her car and backed away, clearly angry but also unsettled. She drove off without looking back. David let out a quiet breath. His plan had worked exactly as he had hoped. She had not been harmed, but she had been forced to face the reality of her behavior. The paint on her car would not fade easily, and the story would spread quickly once the neighbors saw it. That night, as he ate his dinner, David thought about what would come next. He knew Karen would not take this lightly. She might complain to the homeowners association, or even accuse him of wrongdoing, but the truth was on his side. He had every right to protect his land. The following morning, David walked to town again. Sure enough, whispers had already started. People had seen Karen's car streaked with paint, and they were curious about what had happened. Some suspected the ranch gate. Others thought she might have hit something else. When David entered the cafe, a few neighbors nodded to him knowingly. They did not ask direct questions, but their eyes told him they supported him quietly. Many of them had their own frustrations with Karen's behavior, and seeing her finally face consequences brought a quiet sense of justice. But David knew the matter was not over. Karen was not the type to admit defeat. She would come back, and she would come back louder. He had to be ready for that. That evening, as he sat by the fire with Rusty at his side, David planned his next move. He would not attack her. He would not shout or argue. He would simply continue to outsmart her with patience and wisdom, until she realized she could not win against someone who stood firm without losing his temper. The ranch was quiet again, but David's mind was alert. He knew that the true test was only beginning. Karen had been embarrassed, but she would not forget. The question was whether she would finally learn her lesson, or whether she would push back harder than ever before. David was ready for either outcome. His ranch was his home, and he would protect it with all the calm strength he had inherited from generations before him. The sun set slowly, painting the land in deep colors, and David whispered to himself, "This is only the start. She wanted a game, but she will find out this land belongs to me, not her shortcuts." The morning air carried the smell of fresh grass as David walked across his ranch with his hat pulled low over his brow. His boots pressed into the soft earth, leaving firm tracks that showed the strength of his steps. Rusty, his faithful dog, padded quietly beside him, wagging his tail as if sensing that something important was about to happen. David's mind was calm, but deep inside, he knew the day would not pass without another clash. Karen was not the type to retreat quietly. She was proud, sharp, and determined to get her way, even when she was wrong. Her car still carried the bright streaks of paint from the gate incident, and whispers had already spread across the neighborhood. Some neighbors laughed quietly at her behind closed doors, while others simply shook their heads. But David knew Karen would not let the matter rest. She would return. And when she did, David would be ready. He spent the morning checking the ranch. The cattle were grazing peacefully near the western fence. The horses were calm in the stable, and the land stretched wide and open under the clear blue sky. Everything looked perfect, but David's thoughts were focused not on the beauty of the land but on the trouble that seemed to follow Karen wherever she went. By noon, his expectation came true. From the dirt road, the sound of Karen's car echoed once again. The engine roared with the same careless speed she always used, and David stood silently by the barn watching. This time she did not come alone. In her car sat 2 members of the homeowners association, men who often acted as though they carried authority over everyone else. David narrowed his eyes slightly. He had expected her to complain, but bringing officials was a new move. She was trying to corner him, to make him look guilty in front of others. The car pulled up near the ranch gate. Karen stepped out first, pointing at the gate with exaggerated gestures, her voice carrying across the field even though David could not yet hear the words clearly. The 2 men nodded along, writing in little notebooks as if they were judges deciding on some important case. David decided it was time to step forward. He walked calmly, his boots steady, his hat shading his eyes. Rusty followed close, his tail low but his eyes alert. "Morning," David said in a firm but polite tone when he reached the gate. Karen turned toward him with a smile that was too sweet to be real. "David, I was just explaining to the association how you've been making it impossible for me to use the road through your ranch. This gate of yours has damaged my car, and I think we all agree it's a problem for the community." The 2 men shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Karen and David. David placed his hands on the top rail of the gate and leaned forward slightly. "This gate is on my land," he said. "This ranch has been in my family for generations. You don't have permission to drive through here. You've been told before, yet you still choose to ignore it." Karen's smile faltered, but she quickly regained it. "The community needs convenience," she argued. "Your land is just sitting here. Why shouldn't the road be open? It saves me and others several minutes every day." David's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "Convenience is not an excuse to trespass. My land is private, and my gate is my boundary. You may not like it, but that doesn't change the truth." The 2 men cleared their throats. One of them spoke softly. "Perhaps we can find a compromise. Maybe David could consider unlocking the gate during certain hours." David shook his head slowly. "No. A compromise with someone who refuses to respect boundaries is not a compromise. It's surrender. And I will not surrender my land." Karen's face reddened. "You can't just refuse the homeowners association," she snapped. "We represent the neighborhood." David's eyes met hers steadily. "You represent rules within the neighborhood, but you don't own my ranch. This land was here before the association, and it will remain here long after. You don't have authority over me." The silence that followed was heavy. The 2 men exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. Rusty growled softly, picking up on the tension. Karen crossed her arms, her voice sharp with frustration. "You think you're clever, David, setting traps and ruining my car. But you'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." David's expression remained calm, though his eyes hardened. "You damaged your own car by trying to force a gate that wasn't yours to open." "I didn't ruin anything." "You did?" The men stepped back, clearly realizing this confrontation was going nowhere. They mumbled something about reviewing the matter and quickly got back into the car. Karen stood there for a moment longer, glaring at David with eyes full of anger. Then, without another word, she turned and followed them, driving away in a storm of dust. David watched the road until the sound of the car disappeared. Then he turned and walked back toward the house. He knew this was not the end. Karen would keep fighting, but so would he. Over the next week, Karen tried new tactics. She wrote letters to the association. She sent complaints to local offices, and she even spread rumors among neighbors. But the more she pushed, the more people began to see the truth. They knew David as a man of respect, a man who cared for his land and his animals. Karen, on the other hand, was earning a reputation for being difficult and unreasonable. One evening, as David was repairing a fence, an older neighbor named Thomas stopped by. Thomas was well respected in the community, and his words carried weight. "You've handled this well, David," Thomas said. "Karen is making noise, but people see what's really happening." "They know she's wrong," David nodded. "I don't want to fight, Thomas. I just want peace on my land." "And you'll have it," Thomas assured him. "Sometimes it takes time for truth to settle in, but it always does." Days turned into weeks, and slowly the storm began to fade. Karen grew quieter, her energy worn down by her own failed attempts. Her car, still marked by the streak of paint, became a symbol that neighbors whispered about. Some even laughed softly when they saw it, though never to her face. One crisp autumn morning, David looked out from his porch and realized something had changed. For the first time in months, Karen's car did not appear near his ranch gate. She had finally stopped trying. The silence of the land was deeper, more peaceful. The cattle grazed without disturbance. The horses trotted freely in the pasture, and Rusty lay happily by David's side. The ranch had returned to its natural rhythm. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in warm colors, David sat with a cup of coffee and thought about all that had happened. He realized the struggle had not just been about a gate or a road. It had been about standing firm in the face of disrespect. It had been about protecting something more than land. It had been about protecting dignity and peace. David whispered softly, almost to himself, "This ranch is more than soil and wood. It's the heart of my family, and no one will ever take that away." Rusty wagged his tail and rested his head on David's boot as if agreeing. The stars began to shine one by one in the darkening sky. David leaned back, feeling a calm pride settle in his chest. The battle was over. Karen had learned her lesson. Not through anger, not through cruelty, but through the quiet strength of a man who refused to bend. The ranch was safe again, and with it, so was David's peace. And though he knew challenges would come again in the future, he also knew he was ready for them. For as long as the grass grew, the cattle roamed, and the sun rose over the hills, David would stand strong, a guardian of his land and the life it carried.